Welcome to the Nerd Journey Podcast. Our goal is to help you, the technology professional, accelerate your career progression, increase your job satisfaction, and be more effective in your existing role.
We want to bring listeners like you the career advice we wish we'd been given earlier in our careers.
I'm John White, at VJourneyman on Twitter, sharing co-host duties with Nick Cordy at NetworkNerd_.
We're two former IT operations guys who have moved on to pre-sales roles with technology vendors. We have our opinions, but we also like to highlight the journeys of others and see what we can learn from them.
We'd also like to ask for your feedback to make this a conversation, not a one-way broadcast. Email us at nerdjourneypodcast@gmail.com or DM us at nerdjourney on Twitter. So come join us on our nerd journey.
Let's take a trip. Episode 319. The job of a people manager is to care for and serve their team, right? If you agree with that, Richard Russell would tell you you might be confusing the how of people management with what the job actually is. The job of a people manager is to deliver results and value to the business. Richard is a business owner focused on coaching leaders across big tech, scale-ups and startups, and other corporate environments. And if you missed part one of our discussion with Richard in episode 318, we talked about his early career as a programmer after he studied math and computer science in school. We talked about Richard's transition into being a systems administrator, a consultant, and eventually taking on the role of technical lead. We saw this pattern of behavior in which Richard would follow the things that were interesting, and it played out in the jobs he decided to take throughout his career. And we also talked about building trust and an interesting way to prioritize your work. This week in part 2 of our discussion, you'll hear about why Richard pursued people management in the first place and why he eventually decided it was not right for him. We'll talk about Richard's experience as a coach and why he continues to do that work. We'll deep dive on the job of people manager. There are some interesting challenges that a people manager faces that a coach doesn't necessarily face. You'll also see the continuation of that pattern of Richard following his interests, but he's going to add some layers, defining what success means to him and aligning his actions to things that bring him energy. Let's catch the full story. Here we go with part 2 of our discussion with Richard Russell. So once you become a team lead, or tech lead, we might call it in some places, you have a decision to make as your next step in your career. You can go back to individual contributor, you can stay team lead, or you can progress to people manager. And it looks like, from what I read, that you decided to become a people manager. Can you speak a little bit to what made you want to do that and how you made that decision?
I mean, my biggest realization at the time was that the people who are really good at the software or the technology, they're better at it than I am, and they're getting better at it faster than I'm getting better at it, right?
Okay.
So that was a big realization, was that relatively speaking to people in my peers, I'm going to continue to fall behind. And the reason for it is because I'm not actually that interested enough to get really good at it, whereas they are. So I was interested. For early days, I was really interested and I got really hooked on programming and Linux and all sorts of things. I got very good very fast, but then I lost interest in it. And I would be interested in other things such as business strategy or what we're trying to achieve as a business or how people are thinking or what management is and all that sort of stuff. So I followed things that I was interested in, which is people. When I was at high school even, one of the teachers said that I was a natural leader. And I was like, really? Okay, that's weird. I didn't know natural leaders existed and I didn't think I would be one. He said, yeah, people kind of follow you. You're quite influential in the group that we had. And I never felt like that because I was always the nerdy one.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it was the case. I never felt like I was inside the group. I always felt outside it. But yeah, I was able to influence people's moods or whatever's going on. I was like, okay, that's interesting. And so over time, I realized that this is because I'm interested in people, because I care about people. And even my coaching and mentoring and teaching of, I remember there's one guy, I was teaching something about what we were doing. I was helping him solve a problem. He's like, wow, you really know your stuff. He was really amazed with me for knowing stuff. But then also what motivated me was that he was now learning and that I was able to influence him in a way that he's now way better than me. Like, way better than I ever was. And part of that was because of some of those conversations where I explained to him how it's not actually that hard. You can do this. This is fine. Have patience. Open up 3 windows. Look at them like this, right? And these things stick in his mind, and that care, that coaching, that attention that he got, and the explanations that he got that were patient, and the trust that I had in him, then moved him. So that interaction, that fundamental interaction with a human, is the thing that continues to motivate me. When I think of I'm interested in technology, I'm always interested in everything, bits and pieces, but then I lose interest or I move on to the next thing and so on. Whereas the people I've always been interested in, and I think I always will be interested. So part of my reason for going into management was that I find these topics long-term deeply interesting and deeply motivating, whether it's people and how people think and how I influence them and how I solve their communication challenges, or how I align people with a business strategy, or how I understand a business strategy, or what the business is trying to do and how we create value, or what a good product is. A lot of those topics I find deeply interesting. So I went down that path. There's an interesting learning that I realized why I'm not a manager after that, why I'm no longer a manager. But I was certainly going down that path originally was because I was very interested in people.
When you were interviewing for the management role, how did they look at the team leader mentoring experience as relatable experience for a manager? Is it really as relatable as it sounds? Or were there other things that you had to bring in there to say, yes, I can do this?
There was definitely other things. But I mean, the sequence was that I was team lead at Deutsche Bank, and then I became an individual contributor at at Google for 4 or 5 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
Technical account manager, then sales engineer, and so on. A little bit of other bits and pieces. But in various situations there, you express leadership in formal or informal roles. And that might be at Google, I was running what we call TGIF. So I was standing in front of a crowd of people, comparing their Friday night pizza and beer event, introducing the new starters and so on. So you kind of there's a really superficial thing in some sense, but that's an active leadership. There's always opportunities to, we had this project which was getting public transport data into Google Maps. I worked very closely with a team of engineers in India to develop the piece of software that helps process all these things and do the testing, and with the teams of engineers in the public transport companies to get their data in the right places and so on. So in this situation, I was not formally responsible, but I'm providing leadership and guiding people and getting people along the way. So when you interviewed for a manager position, my first manager position was after 4 or 5 years at Google. The way I would interview a manager now, based on my experience, would be, especially one who has not been a manager, is tell me about times when you have got results from people, like when you've got people aligned on a problem, when you've solved an interpersonal problem with people, when you've been able to mentor and grow a junior employee, right? Tell me about a time when you've got a group of people who are going in the wrong direction to go the right direction. A lot of this work is basically about people influencing and about connecting the people to the needs of the business and management. To answer it, yes, all of that work as a technical lead or a team lead or whatever it was in various situations, it's all massively relevant.
And if I'm someone listening who thinks I want to go into people management, but isn't quite sure, are there things that I should be thinking about that might help me decide one way or another whether it's right for me?
There's a constant debate of whether managers are made or born, that kind of thing, like leaders are made or born, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of the opinion that you can learn these skills if you want to, but the biggest thing is what you're interested in, what motivates you. And the error that I made, in fact, I alluded to this earlier, but the error that I see a lot of people making is they see people management as being going to bat for my team. My job as a people manager is to look after my team and to defend my team and to be a servant leader. Very good. Servant leader is good. But, often we look at our managers and think they're not quite defending us enough, or they're not representing us well enough, or this whole problem of all the problems come downwards and so on like that. So I'll do it differently and I'll get up there and I'll make it better for my team. And that's a good thing in many, many ways. However, the job of manager is not to serve the team. That's the how. That's how you do it. It's how you do the job. It's the best way to do the job. But the job is to provide value for your business, your organization, and your management, right?
Yeah.
The job is
That's
upwards.
true.
And it's a really tough call, especially with people from technical backgrounds going into management, because we so often disrespect or disregard that. Culturally, we have this dismissal of that mentality, right? Quite commonly. And so, even at Google, they had this, before I joined, they had a time when they said, do we even need managers? Maybe we should just not have any managers. Let's have no managers. And they had 1,000 people reporting to one senior engineer. And they thought this is a great idea. And then they figured out later on, it doesn't work at all. And that's how they developed their management theory, is what do we actually need from managers? What is the whole purpose of this? And part of that is about servant leadership and providing mentorship and guidance and representing and defending and all that. But a lot of that is about getting to know what the business really needs and helping your team understand what the business needs and getting the results for your business. This is the big thing, which I think is the misunderstanding a lot of first level managers, especially in technology, have what the job is.
And what would you say the difference is between the first level manager and the second level manager's job in providing that business value?
So first level managers, it's possible to make that mistake and it's not so serious.
Okay.
But you're not going to get to second level manager making that mistake, at least not in most organizations, because you need to succeed at that level to be able to get to the next level, right? If that's your ambition. So the big difference really is that the second level manager's job is largely to provide value, but also to develop first level managers, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of that is helping them reorient themselves from the IC orientation, from like, I was an IC and I care about my team and my people and solving their problems, to upwards and outwards. And as you do that, then as a senior manager, that's what you're doing. You're doing that with your own reports, but then you even more need to be upwardly focused. Management is primarily an upwards focused job. This may be counterintuitive and it may be controversial among some people, but the job is not to serve your team. The job is to deliver the value, and the how is to serve your team.
Yeah, when you say it out loud, it kind of like sends a shock through me as I think about it, you know? I've not been a people manager, so I can't attest to having been there, but that's fascinating.
I do think historically people managers, they didn't really understand the how. So they didn't care about teams. And there's been a big move towards servant leadership and to respect your team, especially in what we might call white collar office type work, knowledge worker work, because you don't get results unless you do that. That statement is the reason. It's not because it's a good thing to do. It is a good thing to do. It's not because it's the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do, but it's not because of that. It's because as a business, what businesses do is they make money and they provide value to customers and they sell things. And that's what defines a business. You're hiring people in order to eventually make more money and sell more things to business and have your teams create more value. And if I want to do that with knowledge workers, I've got to have managers who serve them well and do well. But it's so that we can make more money, so that we can run a business.
There's a difference between the overall responsibility and mission of the role and how you perform your duties to fit that, I think is what you're saying.
It is. And the reason why this is super important, it's because it's not a subtle point, really. It's a really important point, is because it's often the case where you can be drawn into a need of your team that is important and is important to them. But when you're managing that, your job is to figure out how to manage that to get the best results, right? Not to make the team happy. And that trade-off, often that trade-off is not too hard. Sometimes that trade-off is hard. And sometimes as a manager, you have to be unpopular. And being unpopular is the best path. Even to serve your team, being unpopular can be a good thing, right?
Yeah.
If you have a very poor performer in your team, you're going to be unpopular by figuring out how to put them on a PIP or a performance improvement plan or whatever it is, or whatever you need to do to get them off the team or to get them up to the level they need to be at. And that's hard. And you're going to be unpopular, at least with that person. Maybe if your whole team is not performing well, you might be unpopular for a while to figure out how to get this to work. But then when you do that, you either develop that person or at least you have the rest of the team performing well and it works much better for your team. You're preserving the team well, but it can be tough love, right?
Sure. Now, once you got into the manager role and had done it for a little while, did you want to keep going up to higher levels of management, or did you have some sort of realization like, I still enjoy and love investing in people, but I kind of want to do something different?
I wanted to be a founder. I wanted to be an executive. I wanted to be a CEO. I've kind of gone through a bit of a thought process over the last even 2 or 3 months where I've learned quite a lot about myself here. But I mean, I had a very big desire to be those kinds of people. And the reasons I thought that was because I thought, well, I'm capable of this. I should be doing it. And I thought that that's what success is. In many ways, what other people expected of me or what I thought other people expected. It took me quite a long time to realize that progressively that they're not the things that I want to actually do. They're not where my energy comes from. I talk about management being about providing business value to the company. This is important to me. It's something that I do care about. But there are 2 things that I struggle with as a manager. One is putting that ahead of the people is actually really hard. I'm deeply motivated by people in a way that makes me a soft manager. And it's actually held me back as a manager. Part of me realizes I'm not sure I want to go that path because it does require some tough decisions and self-love that I'm not sure I want to do. I want to be developing people primarily. The second thing was that because the job is about delivering results and I have my characteristics in that I'm not a great project manager and I have a bit of ADHD and things like that, there are various things that I find very difficult about delivering results, like just there are things that I do well and there are things I do less well. And delivering results, and particularly projects or plans or documents, especially at Amazon, is hard for me. I don't do it very well. And what I found is that when I was a people manager, when that pressure comes down on me or the team, whatever it is, I am not a good people manager in that I can't care for my people. I can't do that well. I can't be the servant leader when I'm under pressure. I did not have that capability. Now, potentially I could develop it, but this is a massive learning for me. I came across it early on and I couldn't face up to it. I've faced up to it in the last 6 months where I've realized that's one of the things that's going on here. So my shift, first of all, from being a people manager and wanting to be an executive to realizing I'm not sure I'm motivated to do that. I'm not sure I'm capable of doing that, deliver results through people and put the results first and still care for people.
Almost like a 51-49%, right?
I think the best way of delivering results is to care for people. That's one of the best mechanisms to do it. But when I'm under pressure, my way of dealing with pressure in those situations, I don't have the capability to do the caring for people that's going to get the results to deliver them. And that's a characteristic about myself that I've learned that I've found very difficult to deal with because I fundamentally, deeply do care about people. And when I'm under pressure in that management role and I'm pushing that pressure onto my team or doing whatever I'm doing, I'm not getting the results and I'm not making them better and I'm unhappy and I'm stressed. It's not a good place for me. So that realization was like, okay, that's not a right place for me. And then progressively, I went down the path of doing consulting, which is more teaching things and helping people solve their own problems and doing a bit of delivery work and so on. And that works really well in some ways, but it's still too far down that path of delivering results for me, for my characteristics. And so that's why I've moved to being a coach, because actually my job is to care about people and I can do tough love when my job is to care about you and to help you grow. And I can do that really well in those situations because I don't have the stress of making sure you're delivering a result that I need for my success.
Ah, right. Okay. Your metric is improving the person rather than, I mean, yes, you want to serve your business because you're a business owner, but I see the difference.
My success now as a coach is about the things that I actually care about. So if I care about people and I want to develop those people and I'm able to do that through my coaching with my clients and I'm able to help them develop and they thrive, they get better results, they can deliver the results they need to, their teams are happier, they're more capable as managers, they get promotions, whatever they need to do, then I get a huge amount of energy from that. And I have energy in those conversations. If my job is to produce a report, a change or a strategy or a structure or a plan, I get stressed about it. And if I have a team, that stress comes onto the team.
Yeah.
I'm quite passionate about this for people who are listening, right? Because where you get energy from and what motivates you, if that's really lined up with what success in your job is, that's a wonderful place to be. And if when you're doing these things, you are the person you want to be, that's great.
But if it's not?
If it's not, maybe look at what change needs to happen, right? Quite a lot of people I know are just deeply motivated by operating and by building things and by creating things and solving technical problems. And that's their motivation. And that's fantastic. And if you can do that and you can care for people and you have those skills of managing and leading people and influencing people and understanding the business, then you're capable of being an executive. You can get to any level really. And that might be great for you. That might be the right thing. If you're the kind of person who doesn't care about people, you can still get there. You're just going to cause a lot of pain along the way.
Certainly.
For other people, it's not going to be good, but you can get there. You can win. I wouldn't recommend it.
We've talked with people before about coaching and being a people manager and how sometimes those mesh together, but there are maybe some differences. So can you speak to what maybe you thought coaching was when you're a people manager compared to what it really is as you've learned it and done it now?
I think every competent people manager or every successful people manager, every people manager who wants to be successful needs to be a great coach. And it's not negotiable. It is something that you need to get good at doing. I think there's two differences. One is the relationship, as in what we do as a people manager is we coach our teams in situ in the moment. We have occasional meetings where we're doing some coaching, but there's a manager-employee relationship there. And that relationship has other complications. So when I'm being coached by my manager, I'm also being assessed by that manager. I'm also have performance reviews from that manager. I also have potential promotions. I also need their support for transfers or whatever else I want to do.
Sure.
That's the person who's going to fire me if they're going to fire me, right?
Right.
And they're coaching me. So there's a whole lot of perceived agenda. Now, a good manager can coach in those contexts without agenda. It's about the person and developing the person. And I have had great managers who've been able to coach me and help me figure out what's going on and find the right place, while also not holding that as a threat or having that affect their assessment of me. It's hard to do, but it's possible. Being a great manager, you need to be able to do that. And it's really, really, really important. But the two things, as I said, the two things that are different here is one of the relationship. The second thing is that your job as a manager is to deliver results. Part of that result is like developing a competent team and so on. There's part of that. It's really important. But your job is to deliver the results. So if you're coaching your team member and they're a superstar, but between the two of you, you figure out that actually they would be a better fit somewhere else. You've got a conflicting agendas, right? Well, I want to get the results here. And it's really hard for most managers to be like, this person is doing really well. They're great. They want to transfer to a different team. I need to support that. I want to support that. It's hard to do. Not impossible. It's a good thing to do. Do it. Support that kind of development. It's great. But it's hard because you then lose your star performer and now I've got to recruit someone else. Now, if you're really good as a manager, one of the things you do is you develop a reputation for identifying, hiring, attracting good people and developing them and seeing them move on to greatness. And then people really want to come to you as a manager. Then you get the best people because they see, oh, I'll come and work for Nick because when I do, the other people who work for Nick seem to have gone on to great things because they got better under him as a manager. So it's actually a really fundamentally good thing. It works well in big companies in particular. And even beyond there, then you move on to a different part of the business somewhere along the line as a manager. And you're like, I need to build a team. I've got like 25 people who've worked for me in the past who are spread around the company who have massive different experiences. And I can tap them all and say, hey, do you want to come and work for me? So when you have these great managers in big companies and they move around, the first thing that happens is they bring along 4 or 5 or 10 of their best people from around the company and gather them together. And suddenly, wow, you've got this amazing superstar team already gelled and aligned because they already know the manager at least. So there's a massive talent in that. And that's partly about coaching and how you invest in your team and how you invest in their skills, how you're developing them. So coaching is super important as a manager. And it is actually, in many ways, the same set of skills, except that it's in a context which is different. So as a coach, as an individual coach, my only loyalty is to my client who I'm helping and their interests. I mean, I do have ethical considerations about some things that they're doing, right? They might be doing. If I don't like what they're doing, there's a conflict there if I have a ethical or moral qualm. But generally, they're in a business that's doing a thing. Whatever that thing is, I'm here to help you do that thing really good, really well. And you want, as an individual, to get promoted, I'm here to help you do that and thrive as a person and help make sure that that works in your life.
And that's the way you provide value to your business. Yeah,
exactly. So that's aligned with my own business structure and so on. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're just about like, if someone says, I really want to be able to produce more or get more for my team or whatever, how do I help do that? We always go a bit deeper into like why and what's the value that you're trying to do and how do you understand this? And most people, like, everyone I come across, it's never just, I want to get a promotion, I want to get more money. There's a deeper why. And, figuring out how to get people in touch with that and what's going to make them happy in their careers is really important. It's not just all, woo-woo, because it is actually really important. Like most people's careers are really important. There's that classic story about the Mexican fisherman. Probably heard it. It's been told a million times.
I don't know if I've heard it.
This banker comes to a port on his holiday and he sees this guy who fishes and he goes out and fishes for an hour and pulls back 3 big fish, tells 2 of them and cooks one for his family. And he says, what do you do with this time? He says, well, I go fishing for an hour and then I come back and I sell a fish and then I use that to buy vegetables. And then we go home and we cook and I spend some time with my wife and my kids. And then I sit on the beach playing guitar and it's lovely. He says, you're so good at fishing. Why don't you fish for an extra hour and get like 6 fish and then you can sell a couple of extra fish and eventually buy another bigger boat. And then you can buy, 4 more boats and then you can hire people and then you can have a business and you can have this successful business. And he says, well, then what would I do? He says, well, then you could sell the business. You have lots of money. You could sell it. I said, well, then what would I do? Well, then you could spend time in a lovely beach resort, go fishing for a few hours, cook a meal for your family, spend time with your kids. Well, that's what I do now. If you think about why we're doing a lot of these things, sometimes you don't necessarily have to define success. This is actually what I was doing. I was defining success by being that successful executive. At one stage I had a team of 100 people. And I really felt like I've made it. I've got 100 people. I had a conversation with one of my old friends from Google. And I remember saying, I've got this team of 100 people now. And he says, wow, you've really made it. That was literally the words.
Really?
Like you've arrived. Yeah. Looking back on that, I was like, no, that was complete misfit. It's not where I want to be. It's not what I want to do. It's not who I am. And in most cases, it's much less of a misfit than that. But in most cases, there is this element of like, why are you doing all this stuff? What are you trying to do? You're trying to get to a point where eventually you have enough money such that you can then take a little bit of time off and do some exercise or spend time with your family and so on. Can you not create something that's more like that now? Or, can you get more control over your life now about your work-life balance? You're traveling 4 days a week. Is that what you want to do? Even talking to my wife, her career and what she wants to do, does she really want to get that promotion, or is it better to do something different here?
Right.
Promotion involves lots more travel, lots more pressure, lots more stress.
I think it goes back to the mismatch between how some people in this role or job or this level of something perceive success and whether it's really success for you as a holistic human being. Does that sound like a reflection of what you said?
Basically, I think most people, and myself included, adopt definitions of success and failure from our context and our environment from other people, and we internalize them. They're not always beliefs that serve us. The people I've seen who are the happiest in their life, most fulfilled and most successful in ways that matter, are people who've managed to figure out what success means to them. And, I know people whose definition of success is to be able to, tinker with the biggest hardware or software or whatever it is, do that kind of thing and have no reports and a low pressure life. I mean, there's even a guy at Amazon he's a senior vice president. He's like very, very senior. His thing is, I don't have any reports. None at all. I have an assistant and that's it. I live on a boat and I do things and I produce knowledge or produce influence around the organization. And that's what he likes to do. And he was really, really, really good at it. But he produces like ideas. He has these conversations with people. He's always influential in the management board as being the technical guy who knows everything and who will help them figure everything out. But he doesn't have a team. He doesn't have a product, because that's the life he wants. And he could be way more successful in some sense if he decided to be more conventional. But that's what he wants to do.
Do you think the coach has the ability to be perhaps more transparent and honest with someone they're coaching than a manager can without being super conflicted about it?
Oh, definitely, because the agenda is one agenda. I mean, but the only conflicting agenda that's really possible, or that's common at least, is where I have an agenda that I'd really like to get a referral or a testimonial, but that's pretty well aligned with what you want. I want to get a good case study, but that's pretty much aligned with what the client wants. So it's fundamentally deeply aligned. There's not anything pulling me in a different direction. As a manager, you always have HR rules and there's employment laws and there's corporate risk and things that you can't say and can say and, all that sort of stuff. And there's your agenda as in the results you need to deliver. And the fact that I really want to retain this person in my team, even if what they want is to go somewhere else. Like it's a conflicting agenda, right? It's possible to be unconflicted about it, but it's hard. So it takes quite a confident and courageous manager to overcome those, and experienced.
You were talking about sometimes the conflict that a manager has that a coach doesn't. Is there any kind of, maybe conflict isn't the right word, is there any kind of interesting difference between having to put on the entrepreneurial hat and tend to the day-to-day administration of the business as an entity, and then putting on the coaching hat and dealing with clients, serving them well?
I think only a few. And the one that you could call as a conflict of interest is purely that the conversations you have with your clients are confidential and often quite personal and deep. However, if one could be really open about them, they would make great marketing. So you then have to sort of balance this. And so when I put my marketing together, you obfuscate things enough to make them so that they're clearly not identifiable or not personal, right? And you can't tell those personal stories without permission and all that sort of stuff. So in a sense, there is this conflict of interest there. But at the same time, if a coach was to break that trust, they would not have any clients because
of course,
who wants to go to a coach who does that? So it's not actually that much of a conflict. It's just something that you have to learn and go, okay, I need to do this differently to what I might intuitively want to do. And it's not really a misalignment. The only other thing I think of is that the act of doing all of the marketing and the admin and content creation, it's a different kind of work. And I've had a shift in my business in the last sort of 2 months, 3 months, which is actually how we connected originally, which is that I shifted from spending a lot of time on LinkedIn producing content and just trying to produce you get content that gets some attention. I was also doing more consulting work, but also trying to get some attention so I can get known.
Right.
And there's a lot of effort and work in that. You're sort of every day grinding away, trying to create another post and looking at how many likes did it get? How many views did it get? Not because those things are inherently important, but because if it gets out there, then maybe people who want my services will see it, and then I can sell to them, and then I can have a business and I can create value. So I shifted my own thinking to be, let's try and move my own marketing to things that I feel are more natural for me and more energy productive. So I spend more time on longer form content on Substack. I'm creating something that I think is valuable for people. So I'm motivated to do that. So now sharing it becomes not such a piece of hard work. I try and go on podcast interviews like this, where I'm engaged and I'm doing things that I like doing. I'm talking to someone. It's interesting. You get to know someone and you care about them, but I don't feel the need to produce a soundbite. I'm focused on providing value and helping people the audience think about whatever they're doing. And I also try and interview people on my own podcast. I just set that up. So I'm interviewing people there and having those conversations with other leaders. It's interesting to me because I get to learn about their story. I get to learn about their situations and challenges, and I'm sharing them with other people. So this is easy work for me, as in it's aligned with who I am and what I want to do. And I'm basically, when I'm doing good marketing, I'm kind of doing the stuff that I do when I'm doing good coaching. It's the same stuff with a slightly different context that I do it in different ways of doing it. Here I'm doing a lot more talking here than I do when I'm interviewing people or when I'm coaching, obviously. But it's some of the same conversations. And so that's really deeply aligned with what I believe in as a coach and what I want to do for my clients and how I want to help them.
I like the process of continued iterative alignment with the things that give you energy, the things that you're interested in. And one thing that is kind of fascinating that we should probably explore is you have the ADHD brain, and a lot of times that can lead to, I'm really excited about this thing, I'm going to do it, and then it gets boring and I'm going to drop it. But the thing that is a theme for you throughout all this that you've stuck to is to focus on people. Once you landed there, you've never shied away from it. It never got boring. Maybe there's a new angle to it or a slightly different perspective you want to take, but that focus didn't get boring. I love that.
I've always had the interest in people, and also in business and in strategy and marketing.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing with those topics is that producing the content for that, producing the artifacts that you need to, producing the value, the work of producing the value is something that I find very difficult. But the topic is really interesting. So I've come to the realization that a lot of these topics I'm fascinated by and I'm interested in naturally, and I will continue to be interested in. But I need to make sure that when I'm producing value, it's in a way that gives me energy. That was the big realization. And if I put myself in a situation where my job is to produce a book or produce a training course or produce a project plan or a product or something like that requires me to deeply focus on that thing for a long time, that's where I lose interest, because it's not interesting to me anymore. The thing is not interesting. The topic is, but the thing is not. People are interesting to me and topics are interesting, but the production of value is not. Every person is different. In this whole journey, particularly recently, I've had a lot of benefit from my own coaches helping me work through these things. And even that question on like, where do you get your energy from? When my coach asked me that, I was like, what do you mean? I don't know. What does that mean? I don't know. I was really puzzled by it, and I had to spend quite a lot of time thinking, and I had some ideas, and I iterated, and I figured out, okay, I think it's this, and then it turns out, no, it's not. I was quite convinced that being a consultant was the right path, and solving their strategy problems was the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. But I realized after a while that what gets me going there is those conversations, especially helping them get a breakthrough themselves, not producing a piece of strategy or teaching them how to do strategy or creating content that helps them do that. Maybe consulting is not for me, because if I do that, I'm just going to, the more successful I am, the less energy I have. And I'll get down about it. I remember finding, okay, I've got this client, cool. They've got a problem, cool. I get to learn about it, cool. And then, okay, I've done the proposal, they've accepted it, cool. I have to send the invoice. And then I have to create a project plan. I have to set up meetings. I have to plan the workshop.
Sure.
Or I'm in the workshop, we get to have a conversation. I get to dig into your problems and help you solve your problems and get you talking to each other. Cool. I've got to produce an artifact you can take away. And realizing where the energy went up and down from is a big thing for me. In fact, my original move into sysadmining was because, there's a trouble ticket. I get energy because it's a problem. I can solve a problem.
Little dopamine hit.
Yeah. And so a lot of these things sort of, you learn over time. You look back at them, and you're part of me. I'm 48 now, and I wish that I'd learned a lot of this stuff when I was 24.
Well, sure. I think a lot of us wish that we knew what we know now when we were younger. honestly, that's part of the mission of our show, trying to share those learnings with people so they can learn from stories of people, of folks like yourself. It sounds like you're encouraging us to almost break things down at the task level as to what gives us energy and what takes it away. But also think about those topical areas that in general get you excited too. From what I heard you say, you kind of had this Venn diagram of business, technology, people, and the intersection of those with the coaching and the types of tasks you like to do within that spectrum.
Yeah, and you can't always be 100% on, like, I only do things that energize me. There's always washing to do. There's always like admin, and there's always invoices, and there's always some of this. I do think that figuring out where your fit is partially about, you got to be realistic about what people want and what demand there is. I had a massive realization about that. Figuring out what demand is and figuring out what I'm good at and where I get my energy from. That's that whole ikigai thing, right? What people want, what the world needs, what's good for people, right? And then what I'm good at and what I enjoy doing. In the middle of that is like your sweet spot. I remember going through high school and choosing my major, choosing my degree, looking at the careers guide and feeling like there's like 400 boxes and I have to choose exactly the right box, and that would define everything for the rest of my life. And I felt like that for a long time after doing engineering and computer science and things like that. I've defined my box. This is my box. And then deciding to be in management and so on. And then having this realization that the biggest realization for me in the last couple of months was that my real fundamental identity and advantage and who I am and the benefit that I create is how I relate to people and how I make people feel.
Mm-hmm.
And part of me looks at my degree and my background and my academic achievements and my career and thinks that there's this intuition or this feeling of like, have I wasted this? Surely I should be doing smart things. And if I sort of realize over the time, like, actually this is highly valuable and it's relatively unique. In some ways, not everyone can do the kind of things that I do with people. And it's not magical. It is actually valuable. It's like, it's not everyone who does this and not everyone has this motivation and not everyone is interested like that. People find it tiring and find it draining and find it frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I find it interesting and I find it motivating and I get value from it. So just getting comfortable with who I am and where value really is, and it's no longer defined by grades on a paper or degrees or doing things that people think are clever. A big realization for me, really big change. And so for different people, it's different, what fits you, but finding that space is really important.
And it takes some experimentation. I mean, you see the things that we holistically study when we're in school, whether it's high school or a degree beyond that or some kind of trade school. Is that still what that person is doing or what they ended up doing? Where did they eventually change to? You have to go do some sampling before you can really zero in on where you feel like you need to be and that area of destiny that you talked about.
Yeah. From my high school and 8 years and university as an early career, feeling like there are a series of boxes and I was in the technical box and being proud of that as well. And I think you should be proud if that's where you fit. But feeling like that and then seeing, even at Google, we had this whole belief about there are engineers and there are other people, right? It's a very fundamental Google belief, as in engineers are smart and then other people are also smart, but they're not engineers and engineers are special. And that's in some ways how Google developed over these early years at least. And then I saw these people, I was like, okay, hang on a minute. You're VP of this or VP of that or CEO of this or whatever you're doing, and you don't have an engineering degree. What's going on? Like, you're in this highly technical business, highly technical role. Even that guy I mentioned before about who I helped coach, and then he became really much better than me at sysadmin.
Yeah.
His degree is arts and music. And I have another friend who is a medical doctor, and now he runs a agile and scrum training business. People sort of jump boxes and change, and seeing people who've done this sort of thing without necessarily having gone and done the earlier training before, they've done it and they've been really successful, then helped me figure out I don't need to define myself by that box anymore, and just realizing actually you can move boxes and it's fine. And there's lots of value in lots of different boxes or spaces or whatever you want to call them.
When you're someone who runs a coaching business, certainly you're going to have calls to see if you are the right fit with a particular person who needs coaching. If I'm someone who's looking for a coach, do you have any guidance on how I might recognize I've found a coach who can help me?
See if they help you. And I don't say that facetiously, but I mean, my sales calls are coaching calls.
Okay.
certainly getting to know someone initially. And I think that part of the whole coaching conversation is, can we speak the same language? Do we understand each other? And I remember having a few coaches early on that I worked with that I was like, you're clearly a competent coach. However, you don't have any form of technical background. You don't have any form of background in the areas that I've been in business, in marketing and products, in technology products, in internet, or any of these things. You haven't managed teams. I can't feel like I connect with you because I don't feel like you've been where I have been or anywhere like I've been. I don't think you understand my world. I've had other coaches who haven't had those lists on their CVs, but at least they speak the language and I understand that they've had the exposure to other people to figure it out. And so getting that connection is really helpful. So my own background helps me connect with product and technical people because that's where I came from. And it doesn't mean that I can only coach people who are doing what I've done, right?
Right.
But we speak the same language. I've been in big businesses and startups and tech companies, and I know these spaces. So when someone says that they're having a sprint and they're a new product development or whatever it is, or they're doing a MVP, I don't need someone to explain these things. I know what they are. And in a sense, it doesn't matter what they are. We already communicate, so we already trust each other. So we have this deep level of like, you know where I'm coming from here. And I'm like, yes, I do. Well, I do know this. But then the question is like, so what's going on and what do you need help with? What's your challenge that you're facing? And then we have a conversation about that and we try and help. Part of this thing is like coaching. There's a very blurry line between coaching, advising, teaching, consulting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially when you have this similar background, it's very easy to go too far down that giving answers mode. So I do some of that because I think it's useful and I think people find it that valuable. But then there's also the work of like getting into the person and understanding what they're doing. And so you have these conversations with someone and you think, did I get value from this? And would I want more of that? Do I trust this person? Do I feel like they understand me in the way that matters to what I need to do? And are they helping me? Which partly is, did I develop the right answers or did they help me come up with answers? Did I get the change that I want? Do I feel like I'm making progress on these things? If it's literally just they told me things and they answered questions, it's probably not going to be deeper change for the long term, right? But at the same time, if there's none of that, then do they even know my world? Do I trust them? Do you have to have a bit of both of these things?
Yeah. We've gone full circle to building trust. I really like that. I actually think that some of the things you shared are potential topics that we could explore with a coach we're looking to hire, certainly, but maybe even also a people manager that we might want to work for to determine if we really want to work for them. Because if they can't relate to you just as the coach, then that's going to be a challenge.
I mean, trust is massive in people management. And this is where, certainly in technical roles, you kind of need someone who's at least got some technical context. They don't have to have had the same degree. I had a manager who was a marketing and law background.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He was very senior at Amazon, director or VP. But he was capable of managing not engineers, but larger technical teams with a couple of layers of managers, right? So that then there's translation layers, right? Mm-hmm. But basically when he was on board, he'd like, okay, teach me everything that I need to know. And he would just lap it up. He'd like systems diagrams, how these systems interact, what they're trying to do and so on. At that level, none of this stuff requires an actual technical background or coding experience. Mm-hmm. It's all analytical thinking and being clear about it and understanding it. And anyone can understand these things if they want to. So he would go deep and he'd understand them. And then when he's having conversations, he's like, oh, I know all the systems names. I know what they do. So we can have a conversation about it. Yeah, he wasn't going to teach someone about which frameworks to use or do any code reviews, but then there are a couple of managers and tech leads for that.
I know you work a lot with executives. And I think there's a nuance to communicating with executives that people who are super technical may not necessarily understand. Can you speak to that just a little bit?
Yeah, so especially technical people, but I would say this happens outside of technical, but people who are functionally skilled in whatever function it is, right?
That's a fair point, yeah.
And that is that your manager may not know the same level of details that you do about things, and that's normal and that's okay. And they may be experts and may be able to teach you things. And some of their judgments and decisions might not make sense to you. They might be different to what you would think. The real thing is to spend the time to learn how they think or why they're making decisions about whatever it is they're doing, how they're thinking about something, how they're prioritizing, why you're prioritizing it like that. And largely this is about understanding the broader context that they have, because by nature of the position in the organization, they have broader context. They have much more connection with managers above and across as well. So they have broader context and they should be able to help you understand at least the pieces of that broader context that you need to know. But the thing when you're relating to them, whatever level that you're relating to, is to first of all spend time to understand their needs and what's going on and what they need from you. And I made this mistake early on in my career with my own manager of basically not having interest in what he wanted and having my own opinions on everything. We should run it like this. This is how we should run it. I think in many ways, I was kind of right about how we should have done it differently.
Mm-hmm.
However, my whole organization was set up a bit differently to that, and they didn't want to do it. So there's no way they would have listened to me until I was performing in the way they wanted, the way they were measuring and doing things like that. And that was right. I was right in terms of like, this would have been better. However, they can't tell that until you've proven that you can do the thing that you need to do in the organization. So like really understanding like what metrics do you care about? Why do we care about this? How do you make decisions about this? How do you prioritize? How should I prioritize? How does this make a difference along here? And being very open to learning context and thinking and so on and being coached. Being coachable is massive. I had this CTO who used to be in the executive team meetings.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whenever any topic that wasn't technical came up, he'd sort of like tune out and go to his emails or whatever. So wake me up when it's technology, when you need me, you know, that kind of thing. And at the time we're having this conversation with a marketing person who was like, here's the marketing plan, here's what we're going to do, here's how our strategy is going to work. And I said to him, what do you think of this? He says, well, I don't think anything. I'm not the expert of this. This is her area. And breaking through this, to get into break through this, because it's like, what we need is for you to actually understand enough of that so that you can be a great CTO in the organization. We need you to be able to ask the dumb question. Why are we doing paid ads? I heard that content is better. Why are we doing paid ads? And you'll learn something. And maybe she's wrong. Maybe she'll learn something from you. But I mean, realistically, you'll learn a whole lot of stuff. And by doing this, they were able to, come up with a whole lot of new ideas and so on, like over time, even like down to the point of like, she was talking about a particular mismatch of something. He's like, well, customers really wanted that kind of thing, but we're doing this kind of thing. He's like, well, we could do that kind of thing in whatever it was. It's not that hard. It's actually really easy. We have the functionality. We just haven't released it. And who knew that in the organization except him? No one. Right. But I mean, because he was focused on his own area, and this goes for like junior engineers, for junior tech people, wherever you are in the organization, managers, tech leads, really spending the effort and time to understand the context, and massive impact because you learn so much about what is relevant and how to prioritize. And also people start to trust you. So the marketing person then started to trust the engineering person on whatever the topic was, because it's like, well, at least you understand what we're trying to do in marketing.
Yes.
At least you kind of understand where we're going with this. You wouldn't run marketing, clearly.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. I'm running marketing. But the vice versa was also true in that this marketing person started to understand the layout of the technology and some of the constraints and some of the strengths. And it affected marketing. It affected how they were marketing the product, but it affected the relationship because now the CTO is not like, oh, you won't understand. It's like a technical thing. He's like, oh yeah, that's right. I can talk about my systems and I can talk about these things. And now I have a brain's trust of peers from the CMO, Chief Revenue Officer, CFO even, Chief Operating Officer, all these executives who are experts in their area and kind of understand my area. And we all kind of understand marketing a bit, and we can have conversations that are meaningful. And this is the big difference between executive and junior. And this is the thing that executives notice about juniors is that, you're paying attention. You actually care about the context in which you're working. The thing that defines the value of what you do, you're caring about it.
I see.
You're someone I can teach,
And when you're coaching these executives, I mean, I love the fact that you coached the CTO to pay more attention and learn about this other area. But it sounds like you're also needing to coach executives to do perhaps a little bit better job at communicating the context that they're coming from down.
Yeah, because I mean, half the job there is, in some ways, is like getting that context and figuring out how do I communicate this down in a meaningful way. I mean, a lot of my consulting work was about goal setting using OKRs or about writing a strategy document or things like that. This is fundamentally important because as a CTO, there's certain sort of like fundamentals. You've got to get your technology working and make good technical decisions and so on, right? That's fundamental. You've got to build a competent technical team, but you have to then give them enough context such that they're able to make decisions that are useful, right? You're the main communication conduit because they're not going to go and talk to the head of marketing.
Right.
But I mean, you're the main communication conduit. So somehow through the mechanisms that you use to communicate with people in this larger organization, you have to give them enough context such that they can then be empowered to make decisions without then having to come back to you and saying, on all these questions, because you have the context. And so this is all about empowering people. And this relates back to the whole topic of like servant leadership and doing it well by serving teams is like giving them enough context so that they can make a decision, then coaching them to make better decisions, and then understanding what misconceptions or errors are they making and where and why, and then figuring out, well, how do I influence that? And what other context do I need to get? And how does this decisions that they're making actually fit into the rest of the organization? And where else do I need to influence? In some ways, I talk about these in a slightly academic way, but that's my habit. It is very important for a manager at any level to be able to do that context. And this is about empowerment. I mean, you can't be empowered unless you have the context. And in fact, the context in some ways constrains you. So you have to give the constraints, and that empowers people.
I love the message that everyone, regardless of the level they're at within an organization, whether it's the very bottom or the very top, they still have gaps. They still need to develop. They still need to get better. And you're helping them fill those gaps in your coaching. So I really like that.
Yeah. And figure out which ones matter to them. I spend a lot of time trying to get better at things that are not my areas, not my strengths, and not my project managing. And it just wasn't the right thing to do in the end. And figuring out that that's not worth me spending time on. It's not the right thing for me to do.
As we get close to a close here, Richard, I want to say thank you so much for joining us on the show. I really appreciate this conversation. Where can people find you if they want to follow up and learn a little bit more about what you're doing in your business?
Sure. So my website's richardrussell.co, links to various other things. You'll find me Richard A. Russell on LinkedIn. I do post there still, less often than I used to, but I still post there. And I have a Substack called Scale Up Leaders. And I'm about to start publishing on my LinkedIn, my YouTube and Apple podcasts and so on as well. They're not currently very active, but you will find the links to all of those on my LinkedIn and my Substack and my website.
Awesome. We'll make sure to include all those links in the show notes for our listeners.
Cool. If your listeners want coaching or are interested, I'm happy to talk about it. As I say, I do the test chemistry course, which is basically free coaching. You can try that out. And if your listeners are interested, I'm happy to offer a discount of my coaching fees. So I'm just building my books up at the moment. So I'm open to people who want coaching.
Awesome. We'll make sure and get the word out.
Cool. Thanks very much, Nick.
Thank you, sir. Richard hinted at it in that discussion, but he and I met on a subreddit about podcasting. And when I realized the type of experience he had, I knew we had to have him as a guest on the show. If you want some episodes that I think pair quite nicely with this one, go check out episode 308 with Ramsey Marjaba, where he talks about what a good coach is and the skills a coach needs. Pair that with the advice Richard gave us on finding a good coach. And then I'd also go back and listen to the episode with Scott Egbert, episode 228, where he talks about why he became a coach. Interestingly enough, Scott says that a coach doesn't have to be an expert in the area where someone might need coaching. But I do like what Richard said about the coach needing to understand your world and be able to relate to you. So if we put all those together, I think we have a good set of guidelines for finding a coach in whatever area you might be looking to find one. We also talked about this concept of ikigai. It's a Japanese concept that is really a state of well-being arising from devotion to activities you enjoy and that bring you fulfillment, or if you translate it in a simpler way, a reason to get up in the morning. I'll leave you a nice article in the show notes because I think it is very similar to what we talked about in episode 20 with the area of destiny exercise. And then I'd also refer you to episode 269 with Eric Gross, where he talked about the most valuable knowledge framework, because I think all of these are a little bit similar in concept. If you enjoyed this discussion with Richard, please take the time to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Share this episode with a friend and tell them what you found most insightful about the conversation with Richard.
Farewell, listeners. Tune in next time as the journey continues. I'm John White at BJourneyman. For Nick Cordy at NetworkNerd_, signing off.
Adios.